This is a course about the fate of the Jews in Russia. It's a course about the history of two peoples, the Russians and the Jews. The Russians have a complex history. They are a colonizing people. You can see this is all of Russia. It's an enormous territory. The Jews are not native to this territory. The Russians are a colonizing people, as you can see, and the Jews, to some degree, were not colonized. The Jews were acquired. The Jews came to play an extraordinary role in Russian history, not in any relationship to their very small number. And we will be looking at the history of the Jews in Russia, which also means that we need to be looking at the history of the Russians and their relation to the Jews. So you will be reading, as you know, a few non-Russian, non-Jewish texts and a few Jewish texts and a few Russian Jewish texts, and we will be talking about issues of identity. Now, the Jews are not native to the Russian territory. They were acquired. And the way in which they were acquired was how?
Partitions.
Through the partition of Poland in 3 different years. And you can see the darker colored lands here were the ones that were first acquired. So everybody in 1772 helped themselves, not everybody. Prussia, the Habsburg Empire, and Russia helped themselves to pieces of Poland in 1772, in 1773, the medium-colored, and in 1775. The Jews at that point, that means Russia at that point acquired about 243,000 Jews in the first petition and about 500,000 Jews by the time they were done. And the Russians had absolutely no idea what to do with them. They were completely puzzled how to deal with a people like that. The Jews at that point had a 400-year history behind them in Poland, a very successful history, and an important economic function. Does anybody know what the function of the Jews was in Poland? What were they doing there? One, you just go raise your hand and I call. Yeah, go ahead.
Money, I think they were.
Yeah, money. Like what kind of money? How?
They help people to exchange money.
How? Yeah. How so? Let me pinpoint it a little bit more. They were managers of estate. So they were the middlemen with the Polish nobility and the peasants. That is never a comfortable function to be in. And the Russian government knew about that and was really puzzled what to do with them. So between 1776 and 1880, 5 different Russian tsars tried to figure out what to do with the Jews. And it's really important to know the names of those guys because we'll be talking about them. Catherine II was Catherine the Great, Paul I, who was murdered, Alexander I. Nikolai is our guy today, okay? Nikolai is the tsar we're going to be talking about, 1825 to 1855, because he's the one who implemented the draft for the Jews, which will be a theme in Mendeleev, and Alexander II, who was the one who liberated the serfs, you could say that. So he abolished the serfdom, and the Jews pinned their liberal hopes on him. The laws of the Jews that the tsars, the 5 tsars between Catherine II and Alexander II implemented were extremely complex, incoherent, dictated by opportunity rather than by principle, and they did not express Judeophobia, rather an extraordinary indifference towards human beings. Because the laws against the Jews were not different in any way that the other ethnic minorities were treated in the Tsar's empire. Judeophobia starts in the 1880s, and we're actually in 1869, 1870s, and we'll be looking at it, but became policy in the course of the 1880s. I want to recall for you, if you want to read about those laws about the Jews, 2 extraordinary books, and I want to give you a quote from Michael Stanislavski from his book Tsar Nicholas I and the Jews, which is an extraordinarily crisp and clear and and suspenseful presentation of the laws against the Jews, so-called, and especially of the subscription system by this man. It was actually his dissertation at Columbia University, and he writes on sort of like his fourth page, until the 1880s, the Jewish problem was an essentially marginal one in the overall context of Russian politics. In the reign of Nicholas I, 1825 to 1855, those are dates that we really need to know, the politics of the government toward the Jews were mostly spontaneous, almost always unreflective, and in large part incidental to the general concerns of the emperor and his underlings. Okay? I put that on the plate. That is his considered opinion. And when you read the extraordinarily complex law giving that was going on, that makes a lot of sense. So just to put that on the table, when you say, oh, this is anti-Semitism and this is anti-Semitism, sometimes it's just total disregard for human beings. And we need to look at that, and we need to look at the way the Russian Empire treated other ethnicities. So we're not looking right now at law giving, but I want to put this on the plate before we start with our exploration. However, given all the laws, taken all together, one thing was very clear, and that was the Russian Tsars, the Russian authorities, did not want the Jews to move around. They liked people to stay put in one place because why?
Taxes?
Huh?
Taxing people?
Yeah, and well, you can control them better. You know where they are. You know, I mean, just like we want to know where the people are who come into this country, right? We'd love for them to stay put, but this is a country of mobility. Russia was not a country of mobility. Okay, and what we have here is what? Okay, it's the Pale. Okay, so the government loved the Jews to stay put in the Pale. What is the Pale? The Pale is not just a region that goes from the Baltic Sea up there down to the Black Sea. Here's Odessa, here's the Crimea. Not just that. The Pale was a set of laws. It just so happened that it then became an area, a set of laws that restricted Jewish mobility in every which way, economically, socially, politically, geographically. What happened was the Jews had to stay inside that Pale and had very little economic opportunity, very little opportunity to unfold themselves, to be inventive, to be creative. Now think, how does our Mendele book start? What's the Hakdama say? What's the prologue say? Go forth, Jews, right? And it's all about moving, and it's all about going. All right, this book was written when? 1878. We are in the middle of the Pale. Right off the bat, we have a contradiction. We need to look at that. Why does he say that? What are we going to do with that? Okay, so Jews were confined to the Pale. We have the issue of going forth. In our session today, we are looking at two different writers, two authors, Mikhail Abramovitch, Saltykov-Shchedrin, and I put in there in Russian just to be the sort of like, you know, that can read that. And Sholem Yankev Abramovitch, on the bottom. I will give you, here are their two portraits. This is what they look like. One Jewish, one not Jewish. Pretty similar. Very cool portraits actually, no? Not that different. These are actually their portraits of accomplishment. This is not what they looked like when they were writing these books. Okay? And so here are our two novels. I translated as the Master Golovlyovi, Gospoda Golovlyovi, written between 1875 and 1876 in the first 6 parts. We're 2 minutes away from looking at the book itself. The last part, so we have 7 parts, First part's written between 1875 and 1876. Last part he had to think about how to finish it. Okay, how can he finish this novel? And published as a novel in St. Petersburg in 1880. Our abbreviated travels of Benjamin III, so Kitza Masoyis Benjamin Hashlishi. The abbreviated was only in the first edition. He later rewrote his work in 1911, took the abbreviated out because he made the travels a little bit longer. So it's the travels of Benjamin III. Comes in, I don't know why parts 4 to 7 up, because I don't know what happened with 7 to 14. In 14 parts. Okay, it's a shorter book, but it's got 14 parts, and we look at them. Also written 1875 to 1876 and published in Vilna in 1878. So now here is his official portrait, Saltykov-Shchedrin. And here is what the first edition looked like, and it was published in a journal. Okay, Fatherlandish Notes. Will you say it for me in Russian, please?
Eugene.
Отечественные записки. So the Fatherlandish Notes, Patriotic Notes or something. It was a journal. Every month he was actually editing it, and it was appearing in this journal. Here is the official portrait of our guy, our man Mendele. You can see the difference. It's stunning, no? This one and this one. All right. Okay, these 3 men of the Jewish people. And here is the first page of the first edition. You can see Vilna 1878. And this is the journal in which it appears. It was called the Nitzlicha Calendar. And you can see how just extraordinarily similar the first pages actually look. And it has a title page, and it has a long description, and then it has the, but down here actually is the transcription into Russian. And on the opposite page of that would be the mark of the censor, when the censor had given his permission. And in fact, I own this book. Okay, so this is a volume. It has several works bound in it, and in the middle is the Abramovitch calendar, Nitzlicha calendar of 1878, and which part of our book appeared. So it is possible. I bought this on eBay for $30. Nobody wanted it. So it is astounding, the paper, you know, that this would be circulating and people would be buying it, and this is sort of what it looked like. Okay, so these are our 2 guys. They are, when you're looking at, I'll go back to the, okay, our man Mendele lived in Zhytomyr, okay, and he moved actually from Berdichev. He was born near Minsk, which is up here, actually this is Slutsk, so he was born a little bit south of Minsk, which is Kapolya, so he was a Litvak. But because he was looking for economic opportunity, he was going down. In the south, one needed smart people who had a Talmud education, and he actually was traveling with some beggars, and I will talk about the story a little bit later. And he settled in Berdichev and then moved to Zhytomyr. Our guy, Saltykov, you see up there Moscow? So east of Moscow is an area called Tver, and that is where he was from. So you can see we are beginning with 2 people who never met. And yet, I find their novels extraordinarily similar in many ways. So we're beginning with Saltykov. And our exploration of the novel. Let me just go to where I need to be. Good. Saltykov-Shchedrin, just a few words about him. Came from his father was very old nobility. His mother was very young. She was an upstart. She was from the merchant class. She was very wealthy. She was just like Arina Petrovna. In fact, people who know him described this as a very close family portrait of the way things were. He grew up on an estate. He went to school at a very fancy school for the nobility, and from this gymnasium, from this fancy school for the nobility, which bored him because people were not very smart there, he went to Tsarskoye Selo, which is the school that Pushkin went to. He was known as a poet there. He was like the Pushkin of his generation, so to speak. He was dying to go to the university. He wanted to study, and because he was first in his class, he was drafted to become an administrator. In 1844, he had to join the civil service, and it made him very unhappy. He was writing during that time already, and in 1848 wrote something that the Tsars didn't like, and he had to go into exile to Vyatka. So in Vyatka, I hope I say this right, yes. In Vyatka, he was for 6 years. He met his wife there, and in 1855, our Tsar Nikolai dies, and a lot of things get better, and he was allowed to go back, but unfortunately he still had to go be in the civil service. He became joined up with various journals, with the radical journals. There became an editor of the journal, was writing all the time, but he was also someone who worked. He was someone who knew what civil service was like. You remember Yudushka, our character, and some of those satires, and he became known as an extraordinary satirist. I mean, he was worshipped by the radical fringe. He took time off in 1862 because he wanted to quit the service, wanted to simply write in 1862. This is a year after the liberation of the serfs. He felt that his work was done, but because he ran out of money, because his brother, who was sort of like Yudushka, and he had a brother who was just like Pavel, he got cheated out of his inheritance, so he had money, so he lacked money, so he had to go back to the civil service, which he did as finance director in Tver and in Ryazan. Did I say this right? Okay. He was finance director, and he was incorruptible, which basically is unheard of. So there were complaints about him because he didn't take bribes, and because he was very highly regarded, they sort of requested him to take retirement in 1864 so they wouldn't have to take stronger measures because he was absolutely incorruptible. So in 1864, when he was born in 1826, so when he was only 42, whatever the math is, he had to retire, which wasn't really much fun for him, and then he began to write and really draw on these things that he knew. He is very highly regarded. We had a long discussion about how he was regarded, so I'm taking Russian right now, so I asked my TA, who was from Yekaterinburg, and I asked her, well, did you ever read Saltykov? And he said, yeah, we had to read him in 7th grade when we were 11 years old. Okay, the fairy tales. And you,
yes.
Yeah, is that Virginia? Is right?
Yes.
And when you were in 10th grade, she had to read History of a Little Town.
It was not part of the school program.
Did you read Saltykov?
Yes.
Was a big deal. Okay, so
yes, but fairy tales.
The fairy tales.
Not the history of a town. It was not a part of school program.
Okay, for her, for Galia, my TA, it was part of when she showed me her thing. So it was part of what she had to do. And one of the greatest fans of Saltykov was Uncle Vlad, Lenin. Lenin admired Saltykov-Shchedrin, and for that reason, so did his brother Sasha, and so did his sister Anya, and for that reason, the Imperial Library, this is the building in 1914, was in 1932 named for Saltykov-Shchedrin. And this is what it looked like in 2008, a little bit less impressive, but it's sort of like that. So I don't know why now it is called Rossiyskaya Nationalnaya Biblioteka, no?
True.
Okay, 2008. And I saw in my book, in case you didn't think that this is a very significant writer, in my Russian textbook, there we had to look at a theater page, the photo of a theater poster in Moscow, and I saw, to my great surprise, because there is a play made of Gospoda Golovlevi, and it's right here. You see, even in my textbook, which I just sort of thought I'd show you. Okay, now, without further ado, I would like to launch into a discussion of this book. A great writer, a classic writer, beloved by Lenin, not known at all anywhere here. Everybody knows Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, and Leskov maybe, and maybe a couple of other ones, not even Leskov. Okay, maybe not Leskov. Here's Zhenya shaking his head. We have two Zhenyas, by the way. Yevgenia Semyonovna and Yevgeny
Natanovich.
Okay, all right. Everybody has nicknames in Russian, so Zhenya and Zhenya, it happens to be the same word for two genders. All right, so our book. We do it the way we always do it. Those of you who've taken courses with me, I go around the room and I invite macro comments. And I would just love to hear from you at this point. How did you react to the book? What was difficult about it? What struck you? What was extraordinary? And from there we will be building an analysis of the book. And when we're done with that, we will switch to Mendele and see what we can do. Okay, let me just get a good sense of time. Okay. Joan.
It started out hard to
Loud.
Okay, the book started out hard to follow, and I didn't care for it in the beginning, but it really built. And one of the things that really struck me was the alcoholism in the Catholic Church. And then when you said just now that the Tsar...
Let's call it a Russian Orthodox Church. Okay, yeah, you were thinking of our European... Okay, very important to note that Russians consider themselves the rightful successors to the Byzantine Empire. Okay, and from the Greek Orthodox Church, it built into the Russian Orthodox Church. Okay, the church, not so much maybe prayer. Prayer more than the church?
Well, religion, I'll say. But
religion.
There's some hypocrisy in the religion, because there was, when you said that the Tsar, the last two Tsars, were equal opportunity oppressors, and they didn't really care too much for human beings. I'm thinking the surviving son, he was an enigma, because he didn't care for anything, except for maybe, he's a very unusual character. He had with his formal saying goodbyes to people when they came, and his formal way of having dinner, but didn't give a damn. I mean, he was just the person we never met before, sort of like that.
Okay, it's a person who in America we have never met before.
In
America, okay? I am sure that Russians have met this person many times and off, and it's one of the problems. Okay, so you did care for the book at first, and it began to build, and I would say it pulls you in, right, after a while. Okay, so I'm going to actually just put on the screen, oops, these are the seven chapters, okay, and we will have to just look at the progression of the chapters, but before we do, what else? Okay.
I was really struck by the personalities. I felt the same way at the beginning. I almost couldn't stand reading it because they're so stingy, they're so mean, and they're so money-oriented. I was thinking back to my, I know Russians from my grandparents who do it. I think the characters seem so different from what I thought of as the Russian
Oh boy, are they
character.
ever.
Yeah, and I just found it almost hard to read the way they treated the children and the serfs. And I don't think I've read too many books where I just really disliked the character.
Hard to read because the characters feel alien, they feel hostile, they feel unloving, they feel the values of these characters are antithetical to what we as Jews think ought to be our values. That is, am I saying this right?
Especially like family values.
The family values.
So
but isn't it right that Arina Petrovna talks about family all the time? All right, it is her major thing, family. Okay, now do something with that. Family. Well, she talks a good game. What do we call these guys? We call them hypocrites. All right, that's why Lenin loved Saltykov-Shchedrin, because he was exposing the hypocrisy of the bourgeoisie, or of that particular class, okay? She talks about family, and this is what Saltykov as a satirist is all about. He takes large concepts, and he then shows, he explodes them. He then shows that they don't hold up. That's one. Okay, family is a very big thing. This is a family novel. This is a novel about the decline of a family. Okay, how does the novel, anybody else, I'm going to go launch into the analysis now. Any large comments, micro comments before we do that?
Yeah, for family, for her, and for the son, Judas.
Porphyry.
Yes.
The red one, okay? The red one, yeah, porphyry.
Well, family, I think it all equals property.
Family equals property, okay? You know what? We know this in America. Property is a primary value for us, right? Property defines who we are. Property is essential. We want our kids to be secure. Property, we need property, right? Do we not? Yeah. An individual can be defined by property. I need to say that there was no concept of an individual in Tsarist Russia. You were part of an estate. You were a subject, and at any point were you subject to the Tsar. You had no freedom unless something was expressly permitted. It was forbidden. And only property, only if you owned something, had you a modicum of security. There was no such thing as an individual entity. You had absolutely no rights unless you had express privilege to have this particular right, to live somewhere, to do something, to own something, whatever it was. For that reason, we can understand that property plays such an extraordinary role. Okay, and then we will go to the analysis. First chapter. Think while I'm taking this question, first chapter, what's extraordinary about that? Yes?
Oh, I was just thinking that the whole book seems to be every character's manipulation of some other character. You know,
Every character's many. Okay, make it precise. Give me something. Start in the first chapter.
Yeah, I mean, I think Irina, even in the first chapter, is trying to manipulate people to figure out where their profits is and where their
Yeah,
land
well,
is.
you know, we do that in America.
Yeah, and kids. I mean, everybody is sort of manipulated in some way.
Yeah, you have to if you want to make money, do you not? I mean, you click on the stock market at 9:30 in the morning, that's all it is about, right? So that's not so different.
She didn't have to do that to her oldest son.
Now we're getting into something very different now. She didn't have to do this to her all the time. Okay, we're talking about moral decay. Okay, we need to figure out, these are people who have no moral center. Okay, and they are suffering from that. We need to move from the point where Joan was saying, I got so ticked off, and by the very end, you know, something has happened to you. You are not feeling the same about Arina Petrovna in chapter 3, what you felt for her in the beginning. How does the author do that? What happens? How does she, just like Jimmy Fallon and Trump with the hair, right? How does Arina Petrovna's hair get ruffled? Beverly, I'm sorry, I talked right over you.
No, I wasn't saying anything.
Oh, you were gonna...
At one point I was, yeah.
Oh,
I was going to ask, when you were talking about macro, why did you select this book?
oh, I select this book because I feel it is very similar in its primary focus to what Mendele says. What is the primary complaint that Saltykov-Shchedrin has? People don't move. This is about a book about not moving, a book about total immobility. Remember I said that the Jews were cooped up in the Pale? This is a family that doesn't move. And as you are moving from Arina Petrovna, she's the only one we see going around, and that's only told in retrospect. We know that Porphyry had a career, but it closes in on you, closes in on you, closes in on you, until at the very end, you are in the last room of a dark house in December, cooped in a snowstorm. And it is Easter week, and it is Easter Sunday on the last day. And Easter Sunday, for those of you who are conversant with Christianity, as one should be, because it's a part of European culture, is the last day of Christ as a corpse in the grave. And that's the point at which Yudushka at the end bursts out. But it is not a road to redemption. It is a road to a frozen death. Okay, so the concept of the satirist, a satirist always wants to achieve something. A satirist is an idealist. A satirist wants to improve the life of the people that he's talking about. He believes that there's a way of being better. And you could subtitle this book or headline this book saying, Move, do something, get out, get going. Except,
The granddaughters.
thank you, exactly. Except, we have people who go out. Anika and Yuvika, they go out. Good, what's the
All
problem?
3 boys have gone out, but they all come back.
Right. They go out because, and now you need to go think back to Arina Petrovna. Okay? We see her, we need to ask why are they failing? Well, that's the second issue that connects him to Mendel. I just want to show that 2 different writers in 2 different cultures living at the same time have the same issue. What is the problem for women at that point? What is Arina afraid of? Her turning point, there are several turning points in this book. Her turning point is the liberation of the serfs, right? Why is she terrified?
Yeah.
She
The
loses her
security.
power.
She
It's
loses-
Security?
She doesn't trust them. She's treated them so badly for all those years that she's
They are
treated
not going to
everybody
go
else.
get back at her. They're too weak for that. She's afraid of something else, and she says that.
She's losing income.
She has no education. If she loses her property and she loses the serfs, there's no way she can go out and get a job. And she says that very clearly in that chapter. She says, I have no education. What am I going to do? And that is the same for the next generation. So the second issue that Saltykov is pushing as a satirist is education. Education for everybody. And that was a big issue for Mendeleev, for the Maskilim at the time. So you have 2 satirists who are pushing the same issue. Zhinya.
Comment. I follow Beverly's comment. I thought why Suzanne picked up this book, because if I see this 1880 written, okay, it's not so far from our time.
Really?
Okay?
How old are
Not
you?
so far. Not as much you think. Let's say I came to this country in 1994. Okay, so people ask me how the culture is changed and how it's progressing, because people don't change. What happened with the Communist Party? Why people go to who is in power after that? And my answer was, people don't change overnight. Okay, so the characters that's in this book, to some extent, they were my time. I'm sure to some degree it's in this time in Russia. And I think to deal with these people from being a human being and being the Jewish person, I think that is that was a case to look at this book.
We say not a lot has changed actually from the fall of the Tsars to now. We have a new Tsar now, and it's almost as if the Soviet Union hasn't happened in between. But we had a Tsar there too. We had the Red Tsar, that's Stalin. So we will have to look at some of the continuity. And one of the things that is really good about this book, it's going to give you a baseline. It's going to give you a baseline of the way people were functioning today. We have already established that there is a profound anxiety in the people of the small aristocracy, the middle aristocracy, not the high aristocracy that was serving at the court of the Tsar, but the aristocracy that has, and now comes the key word, absolutely no purpose. No purpose. I want you to just see, because what we're doing is in an abbreviated version, if you own this copy, to go to page 295, and I want to read you, because ultimately, he is, I will read it out loud to you, he is a political writer. The whole point of this book, and this is why I took this flyer with me, I got in the mail, because I'm old too, okay, I'm getting course catalogs for, when you're older people and you gotta go and do something. Purposeful living. Purposeful living. Everything in this book has absolutely no purpose. The key to happiness is that you have a purpose in life. That there's somebody who cares for you. And that is what is shown in this book. The hollowness of the term family. And you have to think about, not just blame for somebody that they are hollow and that they have moral decay and that they got no purpose and that treat other people wrongly. Okay, you have to ask, why is it? Okay, we start in the first chapter with Arina Petrovna. She's a successful businesswoman. She's got the power. She's got the drive. She's got joy of living. Not really joy, but she's a macher. You know, and sadly, she's a woman, right? But we have many business women at that time. Also, like they run printing presses. Okay, the widow Ron was running a printing press. She was printing the Mentalist book. So yes, but she was driving, and then she comes home, and then nothing. Okay, because there is no love. She doesn't have it, and it goes all the way down the line.
But she doesn't have it.
Give it.
Because she doesn't give it. She fed the granddaughters on garbage, you know.
Right. So she treats, and she throws Stepan a bone, and he wastes it, and he comes back. Okay, and that's what we get. The first thing, we don't start on a high note in this book. We already start on decline. We start at the apex of her power. And when you're at the apex, that means you can only go down. Okay, apex means no more up. Apex means going down. All right, so it just goes down, and she learns that he wasted the property. And she gets really offended. Why?
She was enough to buy it back.
Yeah, well, that's number one. Okay, number one, she didn't have a furniture to get buy it
She
back.
could make money on it.
Two,
She could make money on it.
she would make money on it, right? The 4,000 rubles in the middle.
There's
She didn't tell him, she didn't go back to him. He didn't go back to the mother for advice.
Right, she didn't let him know, so that's least loyalty, and
There's no greater gift she could give.
there's no other gift that she could give. She feels dissed.
Yeah.
She feels really dissed. Okay, and now she's going to get even with Stepan. Okay, which means how does she treat him?
Like he's dead.
All right, so she basically puts him in a kind of prison, bores him to death, so that we get our first cell. There are many different cells. This is a whole novel about prison. We're going to be reading a novel about prison for next time, Memoirs of the House of the Dead by Dostoevsky, but we're having prisons here too. So he gets in his prison, and the only way in which he can escape is through drink. Okay, and obviously, and he dies. All right, so chapter 2. What happens next? It's going to make an argument about Arina a bit later.
Pavel died.
Okay, so we are actually also, if you're looking at the progression of estates where she lives, we're moving from Golovlyovo to Grovino to Pagarelka. We're going to go smaller and smaller estates. That's right, I wanted to read you. We were talking about that life needs to be purposeful, okay? Once you are dissing your kids, look at my glasses, or the kids are dissing you, you are losing your purpose in life. And that accelerates throughout the novel. And the question is, we have to build my glasses. The question is, what else should we be content with just asking that? Okay, so this is the decay of a family. It's like a Greek tragedy, because from the outset, there is no possibility that this can end well. Whatever they do, it will turn negative. Okay, that's like the Aristeia, we already noticed from Greek myths. So whatever they do, it will come out negative. And inevitably, it will end in death. There is no way at the very beginning that this can ever end in a good way. No way, we understand that. And yet we are fascinated. The further you read in that book, the less you can put it down. I bet that was your experience. Okay, now is the question, purpose. And Arina, at the end of chapter 1, asks herself, for whom did I labor? Lyudushka asks himself, for whom did I do this? There is no one there. And it is a novel about increasing loneliness, about increasing lack of purpose. My claim, I have not read this anywhere, okay? My claim is that Saltykov, remember censorship, okay? You cannot say anything against the Tsar. My theory is that he is a political novelist, and I will read you the one sentence where I think it comes out. It is in The Reckoning. We will talk about this a little bit more before we go to our beloved Mendele. Doom, at the bottom of 295, so it is just after the story of Annika and Ljubinka. And there's just extraordinary sentence. Doom seems to hang over some families. This is particularly so among the minor gentry scattered all over Russia, with nothing to do with themselves, divorced from the stream of life, and without a position of leadership. Under serfdom they could subsist, but now they simply sit on their ramshackle estates waiting to disappear. How is that a political argument? This is dynamite, which means, okay, I just explained to you, under the Tsars, nobody had any right. The gentry, nobody in Russia was integrated into the government. They had no political function. When you have, as a class, as a group, no political function at all, you are doomed to have no purpose, purposeful living. There was no purpose to that class. They sat on their estates, they were administrating their states, and that was it. I want to hear protests from you now. Those of you who have read Anna Karenina with me a few years ago, what does Tolstoy say? This is Saltykov's point of view. There are alternatives. We would say, you are not doomed to do nothing, right? When you have no political function, you could do something else.
You could roll up your sleeves and work side by side.
Stop! Go forth, young man, and do something. Remember our Mendele? God, that is the same, because the situation in the period was exactly the same. But our Mendele, who has love at home, who comes from Jewish family, who comes from a completely different tradition, right? There is a spark in him. And it's not just that it is, he says that. He says it in biblical language. There's a whole tradition. That tradition, even though you were invoking religion earlier, Joan, right? It's not there. There is no religion. There's no religious content. Every prayer that Porphyry utters is just words, right? It is blather. And in fact, Yevpraxia, his servant lover, figures it out. She observes at some point, says, he was just blanketing people with words. There was nothing there. He was just, that's his weapon. That's what he does. Okay, so one could argue on the one hand that he's a political writer, arguing sub rosa, so that the censor doesn't see it, that there needs to be a function, that there needs to be a reform, and in fact that's why Lenin loved his work, because he was a reform-minded man. He wanted political reform in Russia.
It took him 4 years to get to that point.
Right. That is my cue to actually move on to the next thing. Okay, now you see, it took him to describe the family, just as Sandy just said. He could do this between October 75 and August 76. The Zapisky journal came out, that just means notes, came out once a month, and he would do it as a serial. And then all of a sudden, he was writing an ending here. He was writing an ending, but he threw it out in 1877. He had an ending to the novel. And then he sat on it, like Sandy said, for 4 years. And the ending, The Reckoning, is absolutely extraordinary. It's not, this is not satire anymore. Something happens. What happens? What that is powerful. That makes the novel powerful. So, comments? Want to deal with that one?
Reality set in, I think.
Reality set in? No, I think it's the least realistic chapter of them all. I think it's the most symbolic. No? Reality. In which way? Oh yeah, it's also true. Reality is also true.
Well, after the serfs were freed,
Yeah.
it took a generation for it to collapse, right?
After the serfs, we are really quite a bit further on. So what's the progression of the novel? We are, when the novel starts, Annika and Ljubinka are 2, right? And then it's 10 years later until Pavel's death, which is chapter 2. in Dubrovino. So they are 12. Remember, they're all sitting around the table, and there's Petya and Volodya, and there's the two girls, and they're about 10, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So the twins are definitely 12 years old. And then it's 5 years until we are in Pogorelka, which is what the twins can stand about 17, and then they go off. Okay, then they go off. This is a chapter where they go off. Pavel dies. And Arina Petrovna is in Pogorelka, and the twins go off. Then we have a new start, almost like a new set. Just as Arina Petrovna was master of Golovyovo before, now we have Yudushka installed as master here, and we have his dealing increasingly small, increasingly focused, dealing with living at Golovyovo. And here we have his relationship with Yevpraksia, with the giving away of his new son, which is absolutely extraordinary. If you needed any evidence that this man is incapable of loving anybody, you have it right here. And then we have here, he actually wrote this earlier, as you could see, we have here the dissolution of Yevpraksia. She goes haywire. She just sleeps with everybody, and she's just having a good time. And Porfiry's reaction to that becomes a total recluse. He becomes a total recluse because he can't deal with it. He cannot even think about it. He cannot wrap his mind around it. He cannot even take her to task. He's really lost it. And he becomes a complete recluse while she goes off. And all of a sudden, in the fall, as summer turns to fall, she does this in the summer. It's a time of high comedy. Everybody feels good. And the fall sets in, and she sees that something is wrong with her master, and she gets right. She reality principle, Sandy just said, she understands that something is wrong. What's wrong with you, master? But he cannot articulate it, and he reacts to it as being a further recluse. Okay, and that's where the novel stopped. And then he couldn't finish it. It took him 4 years to finish this book. Let's look at this last section, the reckoning. What's going on there? It's extraordinary. How does he do it? What happens to you as readers as you read this? What happens to you? Yes.
I don't believe it.
You don't believe it? You don't believe what?
He self-deludes himself throughout all this.
Yeah.
He makes all these religious things to cover up so he doesn't have to feel. I can't believe he feels in the last 2 pages.
But he doesn't feel anything. Okay, let's go look at that. Okay, we have a bid on the table.
Okay.
And the bid on the table is he doesn't believe it. Okay. Luis, help me.
There's a little passage in here in which the author is describing the...
what page are you on? Do you have this edition?
Well, it's not the same.
Oh, it's this one. Okay.
It's a description of the young woman deliberately trying to cause as much
damage,
pain as possible
to
the uncle by delineating all of his responsibility for all the things that went wrong. And I thought it was like an ironical description as well of the author's own activity, that there was a bitter, vindictive pleasure to be had in exposing these baleful deeds, in assessing, even in exaggerating them. Neither in the past nor the present was there a single moral support to cling to. And I thought...
That's Anninka. Okay, so you're reading a passage about Anninka.
Yes, but it's also a description of what this author is doing, because he's writing this autobiographical novel, and through the process of laying bare all the things that were wrong about the family, he's, at least in his fantasy, causing a change and some sort of recognition.
He was very angry at his brothers, absolutely right. But he did not write this novel until his mother had died.
No, because he's trying to achieve the same thing on a larger scale, to have the society look at itself.
Yes.
And the book begins and ends with a description of a reaction related to a property transfer at the very end of the chapter.
Yes.
His surviving relative is musing about her expectations of inheriting the
That's
property
right.
after everyone dies.
Right,
and
the
there's no-
new one where the Aunt Barbara, okay, when no one expected any more children to come, is the one who produced a lot of children. We had a reference to that earlier when Saltykov muses about how there is, it's actually right, a continuation of what the passage I just read, that there are some that minor gentry is doing, but sometimes it can happen that one person is really productive and produces a brood that is very active, and we have one of those, and she will take over this property. But chances are, and Saltykov says this in one of his essays, that nothing will change. He did not believe in the changeability of people. Who you are at the beginning is who you're gonna be all the time. Which is why this is not, in contradistinction to the death of Ivan Ilyich, a novel of redemption. It is not a novel of redemption. Okay, what happens at the end? It's a novel for the reader to have insight. But this is called dramatic irony. You know more than the character, because in a satirist, it is the audience that needs to be taught. It is not the character. The character is showing you something. The author is teaching you something through the character. You are supposed to be the one with the insight, not the character. Okay, what happens to the character? What happens to you? I felt very moved by Porphyry at the end. I was really suffering with him. You did not understand.
Shall I read the part here?
You may read it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
After he hears.
Loud.
After he hears from Anika that Lubyanka has killed herself.
Lubinka. Yeah.
Yes.
Lubyanka is a prison. Okay, so.
I've seen that too. Not inside. He then. She gets very emotional, he calms her down, and then suddenly he begins to pace the room, taking large steps in an agony of grief and suffering, unconscious that beads of perspiration were now covering his face. He forgave everyone, he said, speaking aloud to himself, not only those who then gave him vinegar and gall to drink, but all those too who later, now, and in time to come throughout eternity, will put to his lips vinegar mingled with gall. It's terrible, terrible.
And then suddenly he stopped me, Annika again, and said, and what about you? Have you forgiven?
Right.
And she said, nothing.
Right.
Okay, but
then he says, you must forgive me. And then he's shattered, he can't sleep, he goes out as though he's seen the light. And that's the part I don't believe.
No, he doesn't see the light at all.
Why does
no.
Why does it go out? Why it says it's shattered and exhausted. They went to the rooms.
Okay.
Porphyry could not sleep.
So she said nothing but flung herself at him, putting her arms around his neck.
Right.
And you must forgive me, he said, for all the others, for yourself too, and for those who aren't here anymore. What? What's happened? He shouted, looking around him, almost panic-stricken. Where are they all? That is the moment of despair. He realizes he's all alone. In Dostoevsky, in Tolstoy, Ivan Ilyich, we now have the feeling of the author that gets put in the sack, and it ends with the resurrection. This does not end with the resurrection. He goes out in total despair and freezes to death. This is a terrible death. He wants to go to his mother's grave and get forgiven. There's no one asking him.
That's the part I don't believe, because he has never asked forgiveness before. Why is he suddenly doing this? That's the way to end the book for the author.
Because he's become a child. He's been reduced to an infant seeking comfort from his mother. I think it's rather pathetic.
I think even a moral moron has a moment where he realizes he's absolutely alone. It is this one moment of courage that he admits to himself that he's alone, and the ... means he's out of words. For him to be out of words, that's a moment of insight. That's a moment, that is all the author can do. There is nothing else in Porphyry except to admit that he has no words. That's a big deal for him. Do you realize what a big step that is?
I understand that. That's what I'm simply saying. People at
You don't
that
believe
point, after going through all of their life in one way and self-deluding themselves, don't suddenly change.
Oh, I don't believe that.
They do, that's why.
We're heading into Tshuva. What happened? Okay, but I take your point. It's a well-made point, and I hear you. Yeah.
Well, the author talks about neglected conscience and a painful
awakening.
Yes.
And I think that's, maybe something like that happens. You say no, but
No, I know, I'm listening to you,
such
no.
awakenings of a neglected conscience are extremely painful.
Absolutely.
When a man's moral sense has not been trained, it does not reconcile him to himself, does not reveal to him the possibility of a new life, but merely tortures him endlessly and vainly, giving him no hope for the future.
Absolutely. I think there is such a thing as conscience steering in him. Do you not agree?
Stirring.
Stirring. No, steering, stirring, stirring,
Sorry, I
stirring.
know I was just saying, I was just asking if that's what you're saying.
Yeah, so it is, something is happening in him, but it is not very effective because it's not trained. I think it is relevant to understand that this is taking place in Easter week, okay? Easter week is a very intense experience for children. And Annika and Porphyry are describing their memories, their recollections of what happens in Easter week. And yet neither of them can make it because obviously even that experience itself was not suffused with love and forgiveness in the family. Family trauma gets passed down. We understand that from Freud, we understand it from our own experience. If you don't treat it, it gets passed down. Sure, it gets passed down. And that's why there is no resolution here. But we, as readers, are moved by the despair, and that is the point the author wants to make.
I think we're agreeing. I don't think
Okay.
there is a resolution.
Oh, I don't want us to agree or anything. I just wanted to sort of say that the author makes a point that doesn't help the characters at all, because the characters are who they are. But we learned something, I think. Yeah, Joan, last comment, and then it's a
There
Mendele.
was a lot that the author was talking about, the power. The mother was afraid of this son, the surviving son. She was afraid of him. And now he is afraid, actually, of the housekeeper / lover.
Yes.
And she had tremendous
Yes.
power. Now that's making a political statement because she was a lower class person.
Oh, she was a serf.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But she had the power. She figured out that he had empty chatter and what a bore he was. And she figured out, she had a lot of power over him, his changing.
And why is that? Because he took everything from her that she cared about, and that moment she didn't care anymore. She just wanted to get even. When you've lost everything and you've nothing left to lose, and you're so down and out, you can only go forward.
So she
And
had-
that's what she does.
She had tremendous power. And I think
Right.
that's a political statement too.
That's the family.
A political statement.
And in fact, he says to her family, her father prostitutes her. It's the father-centered because the father gets sent food for Euphrasia services. In fact, and since you mentioned the word power, I want to point out that food is a tool of power here, right?
Yeah.
In terms of starving, food is a tool of power. You take it from people. Food is the essential property we have. We have a couple of properties that are essential to us. Shelter and food. Love comes as the next one. And the food, you know, with Jewish mothers, how food is kind of part of love, okay? Like it's something, like your mothers give you care packages and they send you stuff and the blah, 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 okay? See, jump in here.
Yeah, I just got a question about when he sent the child away.
Vladimir,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he told the servant who was taking the child, make sure to get a ticket. Like that they could somehow, I thought it was like that they could redeem the child later.
Yeah, but it
And,
says
like,
at
why
a
would
later
he-
point.
Did
Yeah.
he care about the child? Did that
No.
imply that there was
No.
some, or
That
was
was-
that for appearances?
No, that was for appearance's sake. He says at a later point, he had no name and he was nowhere.
That
If
was
the
just
child is given away, the child is finished. I just want to finish this thought about food, okay? It's not just the starving. The other element of food that Porphyry practices is he slows dinner down to the point that it becomes unbearable. Food is in so many ways a tool of power in this book. It is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, that shows you're in the presence of a great writer when certain elements get manipulated. Was there another thought that I missed, Steve? No, I'm good on that. Yes.
I just want to say on the subject of food, I think it's very interesting. What you've been saying all along about the atrophying of people's sort of emotional and spiritual muscle because of being trapped.
Yeah.
All of the food that she accumulates rots
Absolutely. Yeah, because on the food that they accumulate as a tool of power, as an insurance for later, gets never used, as none of the other resources got used. And in fact, his estate falls into disrepair. It's not as if they are greedy materialists, because actually they let everything go to waste. It's astounding, because it serves no purpose. The key thought is this is a family without any purpose in life. It floats somewhere in the universe. We never see a neighborhood. We never see neighbors. We never see another city. It's in the middle of nowhere. To look out and they see nothing. They see peasants, they see fields, they see endless rain. It is absolute, total purposelessness. And nothing is more depressing and gloomier and with an end point than the realization you've got no purpose. That is terrible when you get to that point. Last comment, and it's mentally after you.
Okay, so it better be good.
No, it doesn't have to be.
Okay. I'm not convinced that he was actually looking for redemption at the end.
Oh.
I'm very interested in the fact that the other sister took her own life. And he's interested in it in a way
Yes.
he suddenly asked, trying to give himself courage.
Yes.
So
That's very moving, isn't it?
it is. So it's not
Over and over and over, Annika has to
you see
tell
a
how
way
to
out, but not necessarily redemption.
Right. No,
Gives me an
redemption
idea.
is, I was talking from the author's perspective and coming from Tolstoy, where we always get redemption and all that. That is not present at all in Saltykov, and he's not looking for redemption. He does, however, want to go to his mother's grave on Easter Sunday, the day of the resurrection. I'm sorry to point this out to you. You cannot ignore that he leaves in the night of Easter Sunday, which is the point of the resurrection. Okay? And he goes to a grave, and what he wants is the one thing that Christ had to offer. Christ had nothing to offer, but he had to offer one thing: forgiveness for your sins. Okay? You cannot ignore that. You cannot ignore it. And I want to point out that when Saltykov was raised as a little child, the book that he read most was, of course, whatever scriptures they had, New Testament or whatever they have in the Greek Orthodoxy. But he says that that was his primary book, and that those verses that he was reading from whatever the Gospels, that he remembered them the most. I think that is, we cannot ignore it. You can make of it what you wish. But the fact of the matter is that he leaves his house. We have never seen him leave his house. Never. Not once. He doesn't go to Pogorelka. He went to, okay, Dubrovino. He went once because his father was dying. Okay, fine. Sure, we see that one. But he burst out of his house in the snowstorm in the middle of the night with one thought: to go to his mother's grave to ask forgiveness. And that this takes place on Easter Sunday, we have to do something with it, because it's not no accident. What we do with it, yeah, I don't know.
See, I'm not sure it's one thought. I think the other
There's two
thought
thoughts?
is it's a way out of his whole misery.
Oh, sure, he wants to do away with himself, sure. I mean, yeah. But there's no redemption. There's nothing after that. There's absolute end point. There's no afterlife. There's no forgiveness. There's nothing. It's gloom. It's death. It's awful.
And that's why it's the one false note in the whole book.
Yeah.
That he has that moment. Just as the death of Ivan Ilyich ends on a false note.
Really?
Which is completely inconsistent with everything that came before. Or so it seemed to me. It's like, okay, we have a few paragraphs left.
Right.
And we're going to give him redemption.
It does feel
out of
forced,
the
right?
clear blue.
Yeah. I do agree that in Death of Ivan Ilyich, I think it feels forced. I agree with you, but I think that is, I agree with you, because I actually think that the late Tolstoy, even though everybody thinks he's a Christian, is actually an atheist, and he discovered that, and he's full of despair, and he wants to make it happen despite himself. That's why I think it feels like a false note. I think it feels consistent that he wants to return to his mother. You can see consistently that even Arina, remember Arina, we really need to go to Mendel now. Arina, at some point, says, because the novel is so fascinating, says at some point when the estate is already split, right, and she is only the capital, she buys property with her money, meaning she diminishes her, because she wants to give it to Yudushka, because she wants to be praised. At one point, she wants to be recognized as a good mother. It is so pathetic and so moving in its way, just like Jewish moms give you food all the time. So like she wants to get this phrase, and she can't even articulate that she wants it, and she knows she's not going to get it. And in the same way, because everything kind of like moves in parallels with Saltykov, in the same way, Yudushka wants to get the forgiveness from his mom. Of course he knows he's not going to get it because she's dead in the grave and he's frozen over, yeah? So it needs to be, the hopelessness of it will have to stand. And with this we go to Mendele. It's okay? Yeah, okay. Sorry, okay, all right. Okay, it's you know, guys.
He can't have his
No, it's not
mother's
your
forgiveness
fault.
because she's cursed.
But the curse is ineffective.
Well, he can't get it.
Okay, wait a
Let's go
minute,
to
it's
Mendele.
10:09, we were good. Okay, we are all at 9:15. Will it be okay if you want me to go to 9:30 with Mendele?
Yes.
Those who need to leave, because, okay, those who need to leave, okay? Zhenya has always educated me to stop on time, but with your permission, I will go to 9:30 because it's our first meeting and we do want to talk about Mendele. Yes, please.
I just have a question for you. I was reading the chronology of Saltykov's life. He was in France and Germany during the first 6 parts of the series.
You can write that.
And came back. Yes, I believe that.
Yeah, he went to Bonn.
And then the reckoning was when he came back to Russia.
I actually think he was in Germany only for like 5 weeks because his wife went to Baden-Baden, which is like one of those resorts, and he went there, but he did not really like to be outside.
So you don't think place played a part in
No.
what was going on?
No, I think not, because he was very involved with thinking about Russia. It is possible. You would have to prove it by doing a really close analysis of the book. It is possible. I don't think so. I couldn't see it. Okay, Mendele. Okay, so from the gloom into the sunshine, and then maybe not. I wanted to show you, as you are switching books, there was a group of illustrators. Kukriniksi. Yeah, and Kuprianov, Krylov, and Sokolov.
Right.
Yes. And in the 1920s, they were extraordinary artists, and they illustrated this book.
Are you sure that's 20s?
This is actually later, but in the 1924 they were studying at the academy. So in the 1930s they were starting out. So I think these illustrations are from 1952.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and we have another one. You can see this is when Petya comes. You can see the deterioration of, here is our Porphyry. He's a little bit older. And that is, okay, you see what I mean? This is the last, this is how those 3 Russian guys saw him. And here. Well, that's Yudushka for you. All right. What bureaucrat wasn't ever convinced that Russia is a big pie that you can freely approach and help yourself to? One of his aphorisms. Good. Our man Mendele, at the same time, 1870, when just a little bit before he was writing this extraordinary book, which some of you have already read with me. Okay. I know, it is really hard to switch. All right. So I'll just read a little bit to loosen you up a little bit and to see how this is going. Think about, so macro comments, okay? Your reading experience with this. A word from Mendele, the book, I actually hate this translation, I have to say. So, yeah, I really dislike Hillel Hawkins' translations. I think he's a brilliant guy. I love him dearly. But as a translator, it is horrible. Okay, don't tell him. Because he's extraordinary in so many ways, and it's just that he's too colloquial, too American. Okay? This is Mendele, the book peddler, speaking. Praise be the Creator who fixes the destiny of the heavenly spheres and the fate of all his earthly creatures. Can you imagine a sentence like this from Saltykov? Never. Okay. Even the least blade of grass will not sprout unless some angel urges it on. Grow now, come forth. How much more so in the case of man, whom an angel most certainly must urge on. Grow now, come forth, and still more with our praiseworthy little Jews. Among us, no oaf dare open his mouth out of turn. A simpleton doesn't step into a sage's shoes, an ignoramus into a pietist's a boor into a learned gentleman's, until such time as each oaf, simpleton, ignoramus, and boor is goaded and urged on by some angel. Okay, so I will be your angel. So, macro comments.
And I will be your board.
All right. Okay, macro comments. I'm going to go trigger this a little bit by putting my bit on the table. What is going on in this book? Okay, we have a Hagdama by Mendel, the book dealer, who tells us that this book is about that nothing happens until somebody tells you you've got to go do something, urges you to do something. Okay, and then the next thing we know is we are in Yankev, and there's a guy, we meet Benjamin, and he just sits. So, tell me about your reading experience of this book and what we'll do with it. What was puzzling to you? There is a great deal of stuff. You can't say it because you already talked to me about that book. You already you can.
I talked to you about the
No,
other.
we already did this book together,
Yeah,
right?
we did.
And you remember that we had when Martin, what's his name, Clive was there, and he said, "Oh, this book is episodic. The book is episodic," and we had a huge discussion of whether the book had a structure that could not be changed and that had to be that way, or whether the book was a picaresque novel, and you could just add any chapter you wanted. And my argument to him was, no, it has a very tight structure, and there isn't a one chapter that you could change. And he said it's not so. So that was and it carried all the way through of 3 years of doing Yiddish literature together. So yeah, this was our first book then. Okay, so what's going on in this book? Did you enjoy this book? Yeah, okay, good. I'm going to go ask Beverly for the
I mean, I thought it was side-splittingly funny.
Very funny.
But, on the other hand, what is he talking about? He's talking about people who are so completely out of touch with the modern world, for his own time, who haven't a clue about anything, about geography, about when they think that he thinks he's going to find the people who are, he discussed, it's from centuries ago, the dirt and the slime and of the places that they visit is astounding. The ignorance, although they may be steeped in Torah and Talmud, some people, not these two, but I mean some people. It's
okay, we have a contradiction here, okay? We have
two lovable chenilles, but
we got more contradictions here if you're really honest about it. Okay, so we've got a people that's really cooped up, and the two guys we meet know G&G, Gornish with Gornish, nothing, okay? Gornish with Gornish, nothing, they know. They're total ignoramuses, but at one point somebody brought a date.
Yeah.
Not a date, Titelbaum, okay, datery, Titelbaum brought a title. And what happened when the guy brought the title? Not the title, the date. They all came, and they were smitten. And they had dreams of Zion. And they saw the cave of Machpelah. And they saw Rachel's grave. And they're just like Wes. They have visions of Jerusalem. Right? I mean it in a good way. Someone comes, and he's at the Hartman Institute, and worlds open to him. Worlds open to these guys because they do know something. It's just, and that's the equivalent of the drink. We never talked about the drink. When the guys in the Golovievs want to go out, they need to put spirits inside them. Our guys here only need a date. And they have visions of being really special because no matter where they are and how downtrodden they are, they know they are the chosen people. Thou hast chosen us from among the people. That will not go away. That gives them a kind of backbone that makes them later stand up. Okay, in the last chapter. So yes, these are down and out guys. Okay, they are oppressed. Are they ever oppressed? Our Sandal is oppressed. Is he oppressed or is he oppressed? Yes? All right. So what happens in this novel? It is the first feminist and it is the first cross-dress novel. Okay, do something with it, guys. Come on. This is an easy novel. Господа Головлёві was very hard. This is easy. What happens? Okay, chapter 1, nothing happens. He's just there. And we get a description of what it is to be in a mistichko, yes? Okay, in a shtetl. Good. We're in a shtetl. Okay. Except the date gives you a way out. A shtetl is never just a shtetl. A shtetl is just a place that you are now until you're waiting for the Messiah to arrive. Always have this in mind. There is always for the Jews a way out. That is not true for the Russians because the religion doesn't give a way out. Even at the end with the Easter week, it doesn't give a way. Our guys know they're the chosen people and one day the Messiah will come. And they know it. And meanwhile they dream and they read the book and they got stories there and they are full. They are very rich people. Okay, good. But he's oppressed. Good, so what does he do? He knows more than the Bible. He knows a lot of other guys. Unfortunately, my computer is on the other guys, okay? He knows. Oops. Okay, that actually is the collected edition, so it looks like that. He knows Benjamin of Tudela, who went out, okay? 1100. He knows Tales of Rabbi Barber Hannah, okay? And he doesn't know my book, that's down here. And he knows, I have a special treat, the Benjamin of Tudela. I have an edition of 18, if I know where it is, of 1874. In 1874, in Lemberg, 1874, that is 4 years before our book, in 1874, in Lemberg, a woman, Balaban, printed the travels of Benjamin the First in this book. This is the book that our guy, Abramovitch, wrote. You can buy this on eBay for $25 if you know where to look. Okay? All right. So we have this book. He knows this book. This is a book written by a learned Jew. So you have the same difference that you have with Saltykov, who knows more than his characters. Our guy also knows more than his characters, and this is why we have this Hakdama from Mendele. Okay, our man, what's his name? Benjamin, has ideas, and those ideas drive him force. He knows there was a Benjamin the First. He knows there was a Benjamin the Second. He knows there was a Barbar Hana. He knows there was an Eldad Hadani. He knows there were red Jews. There's someplace. And people go there and they find redemption, right? You know, red Jews, of 10 lost tribes. All of this he knows. So yes, you know, his world is small, but there are always books. And it's not drink that gives them a book out, it's the imagination that gives them a way out. All right, so that is number one. Still, he's oppressed. It's no life in Tuniyada. So what does he do? Okay, he has a trial run. Okay. All right, it's a very important scene. It's not even funny. What did I lose my book? Okay, so what happens? Very important because we are now talking Russian-Jewish relationships, okay? Look at this peasant. No? Do something with it.
He doesn't speak Russian, he doesn't know anything.
He doesn't know Russian,
people
which is astounding, okay? Because they're the neighbors, they're all peasants.
Right.
He doesn't speak Russian, okay?
He
Or
doesn't
Ukrainian,
know or
actually.
understand Russian.
Ukrainian,
He
okay?
doesn't know anything about other
And
than his little world.
he is terrified. He's absolutely terrified, okay? So he's thrown into a cart with kartoshkas, okay? With the potatoes and blah, 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 and there's a rooster and there's a blowing his eyes and all that. And it's very funny. And he is brought home. Does anyone recognize this scene? It's the homecoming of Don Quixote.
Yeah.
Yeah? He was brought home on the cart in utter humiliation and he dies after that. Okay, right off the bat, we are the learned people who are not like Benjamin Fudunayadake. We are on the level above that. We are talking to the author above his head, and we recognize that this is the end of the travels of Don Quixote, who was also inspired by books. Of course, so one of the levels of which this is a parody, and I try just to Clive now, that this is, well, obviously Don Quixote plays a big role. We got the tall Jews, and we got the little fat Jew who was the caretaker, Sancho Panza, and, you know, da-da-da. Okay, but that's not so interesting. Okay, so we did that, and he goes, and he comes home, and he feels really beat, okay? Yes, they celebrate him as a hero, but the opposite is true. Always the opposite is true, because he is humiliated, because he's an absolute nothing. Who earns the money?
The wife.
Yeah, okay, so the wife earns the money. Who's got the pants on?
Wife.
Yes, okay, so how does this make a guy feel? Not too good, okay? So he tries to make something out of nothing, which is the Jewish way, which is he turns it around exactly. He reevaluates the values. What is negative now becomes positive, and he makes something out of the one thing that he knows, which is he knows the literature, and he wants to be like everybody else, and he has a plan. And the plan is to run away. Okay, so now we are in chapter 3. How does this work? And this is, it's just stunning. Okay, what does he do? Oh guys, this is not difficult. Okay,
Find the
chapter
friend.
3, you can open your books. It's open book exam. It's all good. It's all there.
Ask his
Okay?
simple friend, Sendero.
Sendero, who is also oppressed, and boy is he oppressed. Okay, how is he oppressed? We need this because you see this exact same scene is going to be replayed in the army. Okay, remember how the army, how they're described in the army? They're wearing aprons, and their rifles look like brooms, and they're bloody blood. Okay, so now give me in chapter 3, Sender. What's with him?
He's totally passive. He's resigned.
Oh, it works.
He
Come on, work for this.
works.
Passive.
I mean, he's passive.
Potatoes.
I mean, he doesn't resist. He's totally defeated.
He's a caregiver.
Well, you know, if the wife works outside the house, you better go do the vacuuming at home. Excuse me, okay? So, yeah. Okay, the wife works, and she says, well, no, you better go do something around the house. He is reduced to the status of a woman.
Right.
Right?
What?
Yeah.
Not true?
Yeah, but.
I mean, I'm talking, okay, forgive me, I'm speaking within the 19th century universe, okay? Yeah, I understand I'm a progressive, we said this already, okay? So we don't have to reiterate that
That's
anymore.
what's attractive
So,
to Benjamin, that he's going to have someone to take care of him. He
yeah,
doesn't want to go alone.
right. And now comes the interesting part.
Benjamin's the dreamer and Sendril is the realist. He's the survivor. He's what makes Benjamin's dreams come true. They go together because
He's the woman in the house,
Yes.
and just like the wives that he's married to, he's the practical one. He
Yes.
shows up with a bag of food,
That's
right?
right.
What's in the food?
And he
What's
also
in
has
the
language.
And
He
his
can
language.
speak to these people.
Because the women sit in the marketplace, they deal with the Ukrainians, okay?
And
So
so
he
does
goes with the
Sandro.
Ukrainians, deals with the Ukrainians. He is just like a wife,
Yes.
okay? Good, now you do something with that. Okay, because what we have is a romantic story. Okay, we've got major romance, okay? The guy goes into the kitchen, is your wife here? And then he's plays the lover, and he seduces Sandro to elope. Okay, it's a seduction scene. I mean, this is why this is absolutely hilarious. Okay, here's a guy wooing a person whom he needs because he has womanly qualities. This is a feminist novel, guys. Okay, this is a feminist novel. This is all good about women. Okay, even on the face of it, it doesn't look like it. But this is a novel in praise of women. Okay, even if the woman that is being praised here is a guy, but it doesn't matter. Okay, this is like postmodern stuff, and it's fantastic. Okay, and Sandro says, "What is it to me? I will go." You know, like the maiden. Huh?
That's his favorite expression.
That's his favorite. What is it to me? Because, you know, what is it to me? Because I'm not the one that depends. Of course, he has to depend on da-da-da. Okay, they make a deal. They make a date. Okay, the date is... Okay, we are in chapter 4. Yeah, open book exam, guys. Okay, because we know here it's a 5:09 or something like that. Okay, so what happens next? Okay, they make a date. Where's the date? At the mill. Why is it at the mill? Don Quixote, da-da-da. Okay, yeah. All right, beautiful. Okay, we're there. Don Quixote. They go. They have a thing at the mill, and there's something very interesting that happens. He runs, and so our guy, Benjamin, is waiting already, and you see somebody coming in the distance, and boy, is he scared, because it could be his wife. Turns out not to be his wife, turns out to be Sandra, who shows up as a wife.
As wearing a dress, yes.
Absolutely, with a kerchief, with the blah blah blah, and with my mom was saying that, and with a knapsack and the whole thing. Our man Benjamin only has a prayer book and a shawl. Okay, it's not too good.
Yes,
all right.
Yes, it's a feeling.
The fill-in bag, everything you need as a Jew. She has everything you need as a mensch. Okay, so what's the difference in praise of women?
A little bit like Sancho Panza.
Yeah.
But
Sancho Panza is not womanizer, so.
But I wish you would try to define the date, because the edible date.
Yeah.
Because this imagination is very Jewish and not in Don Quixote. And the date is almost not important in the sense that if there weren't a date, there would be something else. It's the imagination that's important, or can you define it?
Yeah, it's just that the date is something, isn't it one of the 5 kinds or something? You have to say a special bracha. Yeah. Is that one of the 5 Okay, whatever it is, the date is associated with Eretz, with Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so that's why it's really there. Okay, let's pursue this because we really need to do this. Okay, there's another very important element that you need to think. Okay, Sandro, in his being a little bit gloopy up there, being a little bit foolish, goes to Zelda's house and knocks, hey, is Benjamin there? We want to go run away. Okay? But this is a very important scene, because what is Zelda's reaction? That is absolutely essential, because that clinches the deal right here. And it's parallel to what the army does to them later. She closes the door and locks it and puts the chain. They are thrown out. She's not sorry. She knows the 2 are eloping. She will always call them a couple. Okay? She knows the 2 are eloping, and she thinks that they're so useless that she isn't even angry. And then before Benjamin left, he took the last money she had, 14.5 kopecks, okay? Which is, I think that is really like amazing. She slams the door behind them, and that is a confirmation that they're useless. Who else slams the door behind them? Because that's a parallel scene. They are the army. There are 2 enslavements happening. They are made parallel. That is what he's arguing. Marriage into the Yankev is as bad as serving in the army, and our 2 guys are useless at both, and they're kicked out of both institutions. That is what is happening in this in these scenes. Okay, so they're going. Okay, our next stop is they're on the road. Chapter 5.
You're talking about that institution.
I'm talking Benjamin.
How about the stove? I love the stove. That is a great institution.
You love who?
The stove.
The stove. Oh, we cannot talk about the stove right now because we have to proceed with the wedding. Okay? Right? The stove is good. It's a boost. It's an exchange of, it's like a stock exchange for news. Okay, we can go to the stove. The stove has another appearance right here when they talk about it's in the allegory of the Crimean War, which is sort of like put in there. Okay, in chapter 5, our guy Benjamin has a dream. Okay, it's a nightmare. They're at the inn. Sandal has prepared the inn, and he has a nightmare. What's a nightmare about? He dreams of a wedding. Yes? And it's not Zelda. Oh my gosh, it's Zelda here. He's getting married in his dream to somebody. Okay? This has a function. So we have an elopement, we have a courtship, we have an elopement, we have a dream about a wedding, and in fact, I'm just going to say this now, it's a wet dream. Okay? He wakes up in his own semen, basically. Okay? Just remember that. Okay, I'm just making this argument. It's overturning a bucket, but he wakes up in his own pool of, so he wakes in a pool of liquid. So it's just called liquid, okay? Which is very unusual for Mendele to not have a precise term. He just leaves it like that. So there's a thing of an idea of a wedding, and they're going back on the road in the next chapter, and they have a quarrel, like all married couples have quarrels. Okay, they're on the road and they have a quarrel. They are now arriving in Tedorevka, Okay, and we are in our second city, and the cities are getting larger and larger. In Goloviev, it is getting smaller and smaller. Here, our cities are getting larger, and they're having some adventures. And now we're getting back to the stove. So the stove of chapter 1 that you love is resurrected. In the center of the book is an allegory of the Crimean War, which was from 1853 to 1856. So we do know that the novel is takes place around this time. We actually do know it takes place before 1855 because of the hoppers at the very end. The general draft was abolished by Alexander, who followed onto Nikolai, and so we know that it had to be before 1855 that this novel is actually set, or the end scene with the hoppers would not work. Okay, then Tedorevka, and they meet these guys, and the Jews who have no function, like the minor gentry, are playing out a war game in which the different people are the different nations, right? And what is the point of, why is he putting that there? What is the function of Benjamin? So one is the French, and one is the Prussians, and one is the Russians, and one is the Austrians. And Benjamin is the Jew, right? Because he's welcomed as a Messiah. And who hates him the most? The guy who plays the Russians. And in fact, the Russian Jew, the guy who identifies with the Russian, blames his misfortune in the war on Benjamin. Here is Mendel's or Abramovich's serious message. He is making clear that the Russians are using using blame for the Jews in order to exculpate whatever failures they have. So we get the one indication here, because this had to go through a censor, we get the one indication here that this is a novel also about tension between Russians and Jews. But he glosses over that. You have to really know that and be a very good reader if you want to work this out. But it is very present here. So we get a sense of, because the novel was written in 1878, or published in 1878, written in 1875, in 1872 you have massive pogroms, especially in Odessa. In 1873, Abramovitch wrote an allegory of Jewish history. It's called Die Klatsche, the Mayor. And this is really a novel about the rampant anti-Semitism, not just in Russia, but also in Europe. So this novel is after this allegory that he wrote, and he integrates part of the allegorical storytelling that he did in the previous novel in this one chapter. Okay. The next chapter is something that is very close to Mendel's heart. It describes begging. There were hundreds and thousands of beggars all over the Pale, and it became an art to do begging. There's a novel by Mendel about that. I think we read it together. Fishka the Lame, actually, is the one before that, which is there. It's right here. Fishka the Lame, it's a novel about that. So he puts that in because that was a central mode of Jewish existence, is to take others to the cleaners, basically. All right, and to get from whichever way you could, because there was no economic opportunity. What were people to do? So they find a shtick that will make you donate to what WBR or whatever the fundraiser currently is. So they also have a new shtick now. All right, in our last scene in Tedorevka, something absolutely essential happens. So we are in chapter 9. Our last few moments in Tedorevka. You can see it really goes in sections of 3. And this actually really worked out quite cleverly. They are coming, and this is an extraordinary scene. They are coming to, actually want to show you a couple of, so here's our two guys on the road. These illustrations are by Ludwig Schwerin, who was a German Jew who immigrated to Israel, and he became a really wonderful painter. And this is the scene that I wanted to show you. This is actually a painting which I bought in Tel Aviv, actually by eBay, in Gallery 97, and it is by Izio Scherf, who was a stage set painter for the Yiddish theater in Bucharest, and he died a few years ago. And nobody wanted that painting. When I saw that painting, I had only one thought. It had no title, nothing. It had to be. It had to be the scene on the bridge. Because, and I know why people didn't want to buy this painting, because this character is really ugly, but we know who it is, right? Yeah. It's our guy Sandro with the red beard, and I think people were so ticked off that no one wanted to buy this painting, so I bought it. And I think it's a scene. It's a scene on the bridge. What happens on the bridge? And here you know that these are not dreamers. We are dealing with pretend dreamers. These guys are realists. These are not dreamers. Okay, they're on the bridge. It's a very narrow bridge. Gesher Tsar Me'od, right?
Yeah.
Right? And the main thing is, what is this thing? The whole world, Kulam, the whole world is a
narrow bridge
It's a
and you
narrow
pass it.
bridge, and the main thing is not to have fear. That is the sentence that is played out right here. It's one bridge, and the sea on the other. Red David Ezekiel, or Ezik David, or whatever his name is coming. And he is completely inarticulate behind him. Is he here? Is he here? The wife, okay? And he says, okay, it's now or never, and they run. They make a very conscious decision. They are realists. They do not want to go back to enslavement. They do not want to go back to their wives. They are deserting their wives. That is not good, because that means their wives are agunas. Okay, not good. There is ethical criticism too of the way, this is a critical book of the way men behave. Okay? And that is the moment, this is the smoking gun, right there. They're not going back. They understand that their wives are deserted, that they should be going back and giving them a get. They're not giving them a get. And there's a reason why they're not giving them a get. And the reason they're not giving them a get is what? The laws of Tsar Nikolai. Okay, we're coming to that. Okay, so on the bridge. Okay, they go into groups, they're greeted as the Messianic Jews, the red Jews, da-da-da-da. Okay. And then they're going to the river. They're having a scene on the river. Okay, the river Klufsen, the stinking river. And Sandro feels nauseous. Okay, remember the red dream? He feels nauseous. It's all there, just explain it. He feels nauseous, and what's his name says, it's for everybody like that the first time. Okay, right? Okay, so we understand. And they are happy when they're back on the bench like newlyweds. Remember that? Like newlyweds. And the hoppers come. And now we really have to something very important, and that is the conscription laws. Okay, the conscription laws were so tight, and the mean thing about Nikolai's conscription, 70,000 Jews were conscripted into the Russian army. 50,000 of them were minors, boys aged 12 and a little bit up. They're serving for 6 years until they were 18 plus 25. It was a means of Tsar Nikolai to Christianize, to convert the Jews. It was a punitive measure. It had nothing to do. In other countries in Western Europe, when you have the right to bear arms, it's a privilege. Here, it was a punitive measure. Okay? Now, we know only men who are not married were conscripted. That's why they're not giving them a hit. Aha. But there was another thing, and we will see this in a second. The other one is, in 1853, Tsar Nikolai toughened the laws of conscription, and the laws meant anyone traveling without a passport could be arrested and substituted for someone who had to serve. These guys are traveling without a passport. So our two guys, the hoppers, are arresting them and inducting them and will bring them to the army because they are traveling without a passport. So we know the novel is set about 1853. Mendel's criticism, and here we have another parallel to Saltykov. He used to expose the hypocrisy of the Orthodox. There's two Orthodox Jews. They're even looking in the kitchen if it's all kosher. And here they're selling two guys down the river, selling them into slavery. And the parallelism between the way the marriage is described and the way the army is described is very precise when you look at it. Okay, in this inn, we are in our second in, okay? I'm arguing for a very tight construction of this book, and we're almost there. In our second in, remember the first in, we had a wedding, okay? We are quite a bit later, we are 9 months later, and Sander now has a dream of delivery. All right, so now he gives birth. I mean, this is kind of like the fun that Mendel is having with this book. Okay, so he's giving birth to, in his dream, to this child, and this is why it's really smart. What happens after you deliver? You go to the mikvah. He's there to promise a bath. Of course they want to take the bath. Yes? Okay, because if remember, in the first in, after he had the wedding and all of that, and the wedding was, there was a consumption of the wedding, you say this, yeah, probably, the marital act was consumed, whatever you say. You go to the mikvah, and it is emphasized that Benjamin gets washed. Okay, now we have the parallel thing, okay, so the delivery and we have the bath, and this bath is a rebirth, but not in the way that they expected it to be. They get reborn into the army, and now they are back to where they were enslaved. Okay, and we start the cycle from the beginning. We get a scene of wooing, will you elope with me, and it starts over, and at the very end, we have, and this is much better in the longer version, the version that we have here is based on the first edition of 1878. In 1911, he reworked the book and he made the last scene much longer, and it's a lot funnier. He has to defend himself before the tribunal of these Ukrainians, and the same thing happens. He's scared, but for the first time, something really changed. He finds his voice. He has courage. And he proves to them that he's completely worthless. So it's a very sharp ending. They get their freedom by their utter humiliation by saying, we are so worthless, why would you want us? Which is exactly the parallel to the wives. Now there is a, this sounds funny, but there is actually a historical point to that, which is the Jews originally under Catherine I and up to Nikolai did not have to serve in the army because they were considered worthless. They were considered having double loyalty. If they were religious, they wouldn't be able to fight on Shabbos. They wouldn't fight on Shabbos, and they were considered so physically weak as to be unattractive. So they could buy themselves out of the army 500 rubles apiece. And in fact, when the Jews said, "Oh no, 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 we want to serve," the army said, "Oh no, 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 we don't want to. We need the money." Okay, so when Benjamin reminds them that they're worthless, he's actually picking up an argument from the early 19th century, where the army said, no, 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 we don't want them because they are useless to us. So it's very double-edged thing. Okay, with this, I will see you. There is now more photocopies, so even the couples can actually, yeah.